Richard, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Great to have you in London as well.
It is a pleasure to be here. I showed up and it was raining, and so all my expectations have been met so far.
Well, you've had in the last 24 hours, you've had a lot of British weather. You've had the rain, you've had the wind, and now you've got glorious sunshine outside.
Yep.
That is the British weather for you.
And you welcome me with tea too. This is, I think, the first time I've had tea on the show, and very fitting for the setting we're in. Yes.
Wow. How are you finding it?
It's good. So, I mean, I think we should know that I first of all, I had to get lessons on how to order it, because you told me English breakfast tea, and then someone in the office says, you don't want to ask for English breakfast tea in London. So I show up, I ask for breakfast tea, and the guy said with milk, and I said, I have no idea. So I got the side of milk, and lo and behold, you actually showed up with your own tea bags.
Do you know what? Tea is an institution, and actually when you when you drink tea and coffee, you know what it's like. If you're a coffee drinker,
yeah, big time.
It's got to be just right.
Yeah, it's
got to be. You're only going to have maybe 2-3 a day. You want it to be just right, and I like to have the right tea bag with the right amount of milk. It's a bit of a thing in the UK.
Do you do coffee too, or
I do. I love coffee. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So oh god, this is
so walk me through a typical day. No, I want to know.
Cup of tea. I get up about 5:30.
Yeah.
Cup of tea before I leave.
Okay.
Get to the station. Come in. Coffee. Mid-morning. Another coffee. Tea in the afternoon, bang, four hot beverages.
Now, your tea in the afternoon, is that the same type of tea as the tea in the morning?
Exactly the same.
Okay.
Exactly the same.
Herbal teas at home.
That's not tea.
It's not.
That is a trade description issue. Tea is a thing. It is a plant.
Yeah.
And a blackcurrant chamomile. It's a hot beverage. It's not a tea.
Yeah, I like my hot beverages.
I know I'm going to get pilloried for that.
No,
that's going to get quite a reaction.
So no sugar in the tea though.
Yeah, half a sugar in the morning, not in the afternoon.
So Neil Michael, he's our global CRO on the international side. Andrea D'Amato is the US CRO. We had a whole chat about this. Apparently, if you put milk and sugar in the tea, according to Neil, you actually don't like tea.
Well, I think that's probably fair. I imagine, in India, they don't put milk in it at all. That is a very British thing.
Yeah.
I probably commit sacrilege to the tea purists.
I'm sure we could have a huge debate about this. We'll bring people in.
There's a whole thing about tea. There's a brilliant book by an anthropologist called Kate Fox. It's a few years old now, called Watching the English, and she describes the institution of tea and how in any situation, whether it's positive, you might be in a positive work situation or a positive family situation, or a negative one, something that's getting, negotiation that's going a bit south, or, a tense situation in a friend environment. And the default setting is, anyone like tea? That's the sort of diffusing or celebratory moment. So it's a real thing.
I mean, there must be some sort of sharing component in our brain that switches off with that, right?
I think it is. It's that antidote to whatever's going on, or It's who'd like tea?
Well, I love that, because that's tied with community, right? And that's a big part of what I want to dig into today. First let's talk about you, and I'd love to know your story, your background, and then we'll get into B2B marketing and Propolis.
Sure. I mean, look, I won't go all the way back, but I basically started my career in sales. I came out of university having done a degree and a postgrad with the intention of going into urban regeneration. Spent a lot of my parents' money.
Interesting. Why sales then?
Because I came out of university, and to go into an urban regeneration job, it was about £10,000 a year, and a sales job was about £17,000 a year. So I thought I'd do that just to pay off a few debts, and found that I really enjoyed it. Was quite good at it. I had good training. Went to a really good company, and just started earning commission, and it was great fun, and it was a great team environment, and loved it. And I've stayed in that sort of world ever since, really, in and around media and exhibitions, and latterly a bit of software as a service. But I've kind of stayed in sales and marketing ever since, much to my parents' chagrin. But they understand. But it was. It wasn't what I intended to do when I entered university.
It's funny, that's on this show, that's kind of been a recurring theme,
sure.
Especially about how careers aren't necessarily linear. So I keep hearing wiggle or taking a step back to get forward, but I'm talking to someone tomorrow in the prep call. I learned that they wanted to be a teacher, and then someone else was in politics, and just seeing these different career attributions and backgrounds, and then where they've ended up has just been remarkable.
It's crazy. I've got one son at university, another one about to go, and another one only 2 years away. And I think it, even though it didn't end up doing what I intended to do, it helps helps you hit deadlines. It helps you work with people. It's on your own terms. So if you don't get your assignment in, no one's going to care. They're just going to fail you. So I think it shapes you as a person. It raises the kind of intellectual capacity because you have good debate, and it opens your mind a little bit. So I think the whole university experience, even if you don't end up following a vocation, is a hugely important part of your life. And I think you're probably you end up a more rounded individual in whatever work you go into.
No, I agree. Yeah. I mean, in the U.S., I don't know if they call it the same here, but I had a liberal arts education, right? And so, obviously, I'm in sales now, and that's what my day job is running a sales team. But we studied philosophy and histories and literature, and I, at the very least, it's helped me relate a lot more to people. And by and large, that's what sales is, right? Yeah,
that's very true, very true. Although in the UK, I don't know what it's like in the US, but it's a very expensive way of finding yourself.
Very expensive, yeah. So it's become big business in the US. It really is. And I think a lot of people are second guessing that. And there's been a lot of scholarships that have popped up around vocational schools, right? And people that are just looking to become a welder or a plumber. And my brother's a welder, and that could be a very successful field without coming out with $100,000 in college debt, right?
Completely, and apprenticeships are better than ever.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be said for going into the world of work and getting that experience earlier. So I think there were genuine choices. I don't think you have to go into university.
Yeah.
I was the first in my family to go to university, so my parents didn't have a clue really what was going on. It was all kind of organised by me. And a true story, I didn't even have halls of residence when I got there, and I spent my first week at university staying in a monastery in Cockfosters in North London because I didn't get because it was all very last minute. Couldn't get into halls.
Yeah.
And Catholic upbringing, and they managed to pull some strings in the Catholic Church in North London and get me into a monastery. I don't think I've ever told anyone that.
Hopefully, you stayed out of trouble. And
it was a holier than thou experience, and I got into halls after a couple of weeks. So, but yeah, that was quite something.
Wow, that's great. That's awesome. So obviously, it's worked out for you because fast forward, you're the CEO of B2B Marketing.
Yeah, well, I guess, yeah. I mean, I spent a long time in sales and then worked my way up through to kind of sales management, then running commercial teams. I worked in B2B for the first 4 years. I then had a stint at a national newspaper, running the creative solutions team, which was brilliant. Absolutely loved it. So a bit of B2C experience. Then came back into B2B at a business called UBM, who had acquired my original employer. Ran commercial teams there, and then I did a slight change and went into a big sales transformation project. I'd always been interested in the ins and outs of how sales runs and what makes sales excellence, if you like. And I was asked to do that on a bigger scale, and ended up doing a pretty long-term 4-year project, creating a sales operating model in EMEA. Asia and the US in an organisation that was grown, an events organisation that had grown through acquisition, but actually the organic growth was pretty flat. So uncovering that and then creating a much more structured operating model, so people, process, tech, data was a great project. And then I ended up working on a marketing transformation project as well, which was really where I sort of got to really understand the ins and outs of marketing and marketing operating models as well. So
I'd love to dig in it a little bit on that, because obviously a lot of the marketers that we talk to have to obviously work very closely with a sales organization. So coming out of those two transformations, any key learnings, pivotal moments that have really kind of shaped your thinking around marketing and sales?
Well, it's interesting. It's what is really clear is that large organizations can grow and can be successful while still having some fundamentally broken processes, systems, structures. So the organisation we had was growing. It was, there was no question it was a very successful organisation. But actually, when you looked underneath the skin, we had 113 different job titles for salespeople in Europe alone, and that was the product of no real organisational design, no real structure across the organisation, lots of acquisitions, integrated to varying degrees, job title inflation where people have been, given, a job title instead of salary. And people, managers have caved into saying, look, I'll only stay if you make me, director of this tiny portion with, 1.5 people reporting to me. It was that, but that had gone on for, 10, 15 years. And you end up with an OD that is just out of control. So when you try and bring in better processes or use CRM properly with a genuine set of pipeline processes, it's really difficult. It's really difficult with capability building because you've got different people in different roles, and there's no real consistency in terms of capability benchmarking. So one of the big learnings was actually doing that work is hard, but it's worth it because we took those 113 down to a sales family of 13.
Wow.
Which was a pretty Herculean task. But what it meant was that there was real structure and people were clear on their roles and they had job descriptions that they understood, and it made it better to, much easier to set objectives and then measure against those objectives. And it made it easier to set up CRM processes and commission schemes that actually meant something, that actually worked, and were real incentives. So yeah, I mean, I think taking some of those big thorny issues and crunchy issues that often organisations leave is well worth doing because it did lead to organic growth improvement, and ultimately UBM were acquired by Informa.
Wow.
I can't say that was it was a contributory factor, but I played a small part in that. But it was
No, that's fascinating. I mean, we've gone through some of that ourselves. Foundry IDG, been around for 65 years, grown from the ground up. As we've grown, over time, we did a lot of that just by organic growth in terms of the way EMEA team ran was completely different than the US team. And then so, I'll take Salesforce as an example. We had all these different examples of Salesforce instances globally, right? And so, as we've kind of centralized as a business, Matt York, our last CRO, had to essentially do exactly what you're talking about. And that was, it was a big digital transformation initiative for us. And, now we're a more centralized, cohesive, business, which now is allowing us to scale. And
exactly.
Scale is hard when you have all these different titles and reporting structures and data sitting over here and data sitting over there.
Yeah, you end up with just a set of small businesses within the structure of a larger organisation. Yeah. And then the benefit of the larger organisation is much more difficult to achieve because effectively it's a selection of small businesses with their own operating models, their own systems, their own structures. So you don't get the benefit, the multiplier effect of being part of a large organisation. So once you organise what sits beneath, you get all of that benefit of having one instance of Salesforce that really works, that you can build upon, and then you can roll out globally. So we did the same thing in Asia, and that was quite something, affecting a change project like that in an Asia context as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
With all of the additional challenges around language and culture, and a Western transformation team coming in and trying to affect change. That was probably one of the most rewarding parts of my career. Actually, was affecting change in that area.
That's amazing. So I want to get into your role at B2B Marketing, but first, looking back, with the journey you've had and the success you've had, what advice would you give to your earlier self in your career, or someone who's kind of like you but 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I mean, I think there's a bit about believing that something really ambitious is possible. Because if somebody said to me, the exam question I was asked by the CEO who came in and gave me this opportunity was, I want you to tell me how sales and latterly marketing works at UBM. That's the exam question. And I'm going to give you there's investment in consultancy that's going to help you do this, but this is the big exam question. And if I'd thought, unless somebody had said that to me, I was doing some of that work, but not on that scale, not on that level. It was in EMEA, but this was about the whole organisation. And I think when somebody pushes you like that and gives you that opportunity, you realise actually you are capable of it. But there are so many self-limiting beliefs. Yeah. That come from your history, that come from your childhood, that come from your early career. There's a cap on what you think is possible. But actually, I think for most people, the cap on what is possible is significantly higher than you set for yourself.
Let me ask you, when you were given that exam question, per se, had you thought about it at that scale before, or did it take that question to really get you to start thinking about that scale?
We've been tinkering with it, but actually the capacity was, we can roll out a new sales process, and what we could probably do is put some training in, and we might be able to get our commission schemes a little bit better. It was that, but this was no. This is an entire operating model for the entire organisation. I want you to describe how it should all work, linked up for the whole organisation. How should international sales work when you've got events that we're running that might have 52 different countries feeding into them. It was on a grand scale. So I wouldn't have even considered it as a possibility to even achieve that.
Yeah.
So no, I hadn't thought that before. But if I look back now, then actually it does give you a bit more confidence that achieving something that is Honda used to have a brilliant strap line, which was difficult is worth doing. And I've always thought about that, and that gives you a bit more impetus to say, something that's difficult is probably worth the effort. I
love it. So some advice someone gave me earlier on in my career was, if that next opportunity doesn't scare you a little bit, it's not big enough for you.
Sure.
And I really thought about that because, going back to what you said earlier, like some of these self-doubts or limitations are in our mind, and you got to be able to put yourself in a little bit of a difficult position to grow. Otherwise, you're not in a position to grow, right? So,
completely.
All right. So, B2B Marketing CEO. How long have you been with the company now?
I have been just over 2 years.
Okay. And then what was kind of your mandate coming in?
So, the business has been around for 20 years. It was set up by two founders, James Farmer, Joel Harrison, who had established a B2B business, a B2B marketing magazine. It was called B2B Marketing Magazine originally, at a time when really marketing, certainly in the UK and Europe, and to an extent in the US as well, was all seen through the lens of consumer marketing. Mm-hmm. And B2B was seen as this sort of slightly quirky adjunct for data geeks who were working with other businesses, and it was seen as the sort of slightly quirky, grubby end of B2B. What they realised, and quite rightly, is that it absolutely was never that. It was a growing, thriving business that was gradually getting better and better with technology, and MarTech was started to accelerate that. And they felt that was a niche in its own right. So they set up B2B Marketing Magazine. So it is no coincidence that the name of our business is the name of the industry itself. It's great for organic search.
Right.
But it was because they're widely credited with giving it home, definition, a place where that small but growing group of B2B marketing specialists, could call home. And that business grew, I'm sure much like IDG, grew out of magazine to, into events and into, newsletters and awards. So that the business grew rapidly. And the magazine was closed about 5 years ago, and it became an events business. COVID hit, and like many events businesses, it impacted hard. We're not a huge business, so it impacted very hard. And at the time, the business, it was really a sort of reinvent or die. And they did what any good business should do, is look at the voice of the customer, went to the customer and say, look, what do you need from us over the next couple of years? This is going to be a rocky couple of years. What do you need? And they came back resoundingly and said, what we need is the event that you run, Ignite. It's a broad-based B2B marketing show. We come there for expertise. We come there for independent advice. We come there for inspiration, for networking, for peer-to-peer learning. We'd like that all year round. We'd like that on demand. We'd like to be able to talk to each other. We'd like to have access to your experts, but just when we want it. And that was the genesis of Propolis. And I joined at the time when Propolis had just launched. And the mandate was to grow the organisation with what became a Propolis-centred strategy. So we run not a Propolis-only strategy, but we run our events, we run marketing solutions, we run Propolis, and to integrate the whole business to become a Propolis-centred organisation, a community-centred business.
So like a subscription-based community for
with
people that were normally attending events, right?
But integrated, really well, properly with our events, with our solutions, so that link the whole business together, and you get that kind of multiplier effect. Because we are, B2B marketing is a community. It's a big global community. And we'd been given this over the years that Joel and James had run the business. We've been given this permission, if you like, to be the convener, to be the trusted influencer, the voice, the place where people wanted to come. And we've been given this permission to do it now on a kind of recurring revenue subscription, on demand basis.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I'm a big believer in community overall. I mean, it's been huge for my personal career. On the marketing side specifically, so just thinking about the B2B marketer, why is community important? Like, what do you think it means to the average B2B marketer?
Well, from our experience with Propolis and outside of Propolis, communities, I mean, you see it at our events. In fact, you see it at all events, but it seems to be particularly acute at our events. It is this opportunity. There's a generosity of spirit in B2B marketing that doesn't exist in quite the same way in the places. It doesn't exist in sales, that is for sure. It doesn't exist in quite the same way in anything else I've seen. So B2B marketing, there's this willingness to help and to support each other, both in industry, even in competing organisations, as well as cross sector. And I think part of that is about the recognition that a lot of the challenges that B2B marketers are going through are not in isolation. There's very little that somebody's going through with thinking through their first steps in ABM, in customer experience. I know your audience of partner marketers, channel marketing or ecosystem marketing. The challenges that go with that. Nobody has those challenges alone. And when you actually get with other people in a room or in a virtual room or in the Propolis community, the ability to talk to others and recognise and find out that they're going through the same thing, and they may have an answer. They may not have the whole answer. They may have a complete answer. That there are other people out there who have got similar experience in an organisation of the same level, of the same scale, that can help and are willing to help. That to me is the power of community. Yeah,
I love that because one of the things I think about, and you and I kind of talked about this a little bit on our prep call, was a lot of the social platforms, especially where I see B2B marketers most present, LinkedIn, for example, they're more broadcast. Right? People want to talk about the great work they're doing, how great their jobs are. You don't see a lot of vulnerability, and I think that's key because when you need help, you have to showcase you're a little vulnerable in that help part. Right?
Yeah, I think vulnerability is absolutely right, and that is what we see. It takes some courage to say, actually, I'm going through this and I don't know how to do it. Or I've got this challenge and can somebody help me? And I think, look, LinkedIn is a brilliant platform. We use it all the time. I'm sure you do as an organisation and personally. Interestingly, when somebody does show vulnerability and there's a genuine, human post, it's incredible the response it gets.
It is, isn't it?
Because it stands out.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's the fault of LinkedIn or any of the social media platforms. It's the users. It's kind of influence at scale, and it just becomes noisy. I wonder, here's a good question. I wonder how many people actually read posts before they like them or react to them or do anything. I think I'm probably guilty of just going, I know them, I like them. A couple of lines, like. I think there's a few things around that are it's too broadcast. It's too self-serving. And I think people just don't have the time to read it. So I wonder, I would love to know, how much people actually genuinely read and absorb on the scale platforms. Again, it's not about the platform, it's about the way that users use it.
Yeah, it's interesting because so at the end of every podcast, I ask for advice. And I on the way over here, I literally did a post of just listing the advice from my first, I think, 7 guests, right? Just in order. But when you're scrolling through the feed, you only see the little paragraph at the top, and you don't even see anybody's advice underneath it unless you expand. And so I'm thinking I'm not actually going to get a lot of engagement on there because I don't think a lot of people are going to hit the read more and actually see the advice from, the head of marketing at Zscaler and Okta and Microsoft, because you don't see it in that little scroll bar, right?
Exactly right. So when you've got smaller communities, and there are communities for every industry, and LinkedIn is a community of communities, and you've got Quora with other communities. There is engagement. There is there is richness. It's just easier to find in a smaller community, and people don't, particularly with Propolis, they don't come at it from a self-promotion point of view. That's not what they're in there for. They're in there because they've got a problem to solve. They've got they want to be inspired on what's coming next on B2B marketing. They've got a gap in capability that they want to fill. So we're very specifically an expert community. So experts because the practitioners, the people who are members, are doing the job, so they're experts in their own right. But we also have specific practitioners, experts who can provide practical advice from lived experience, being B2B marketers and working with global organisations. So it's not about we eschew the kind of fluffy, bloggy style,
right?
Really quite lightweight thought leadership, and we go for models, research, best practice. Community sprints is a construct that we have, which is where we get the community to go hard at a particular issue together, diagnose the problem, then come up with solutions, and then we turn that effectively empirical research and turn that into something like a technical model or a piece of research or an infographic. But it's community driven. So you've got the collective expertise. We call our business community intelligence. So we I suppose you'd call us a legacy publisher. We now describe ourselves as a community intelligence business.
Now, so you launched it in the height of COVID. A couple years along now, how has the community changed? Has Propolis evolved since then?
Yeah, I mean, when it was originally launched, it was brilliant. It had loads of content. We had our experts who were all fantastic. Experts from strategy all the way through to data, customer experience, campaigns and execution, and so on. I think when it was launched, we went for volume over quality. So it was about what have we got that we can put in there? How much what can we write quick enough to get in there?
Yeah.
We relaunched it a year after I started because it became difficult to navigate, and it became the conversations were getting buried, and we actually got rid of 400 pieces of content that we felt were just too lightweight.
Wow.
What we wanted to do was have content in there, advice, conversation that is going to help you practically do something different in your job tomorrow. So it was about it's a pragmatic community, not a sort of not too aspirational and too bloggy, because you can get that elsewhere. You can search for anywhere. Search ABM, search customer experience. You'll get people's opinions on that. What you want is people who are actually doing the job, and the going from you'll get from some organisations, this is what perfection looks like. Certain consultancies, lots of businesses will say, here's a 52-page deck. This is how you do it. But actually, the reality is that perfection isn't possible in most organisations. What they want is this is an aspiration on what really good looks like. But here are the practicalities of actually rolling out in an organisation that is in itself imperfect. And that's what we try to do. Is be we do try to be aspirational but pragmatic.
Now, do you get as people are coming in and seeking this pragmatic, practical advice, do you get people responding back with, hey, I tried this and these are the results, and sharing those success stories? Sure,
we do. We've got a product that we've launched about 9 months ago called the Community Index, which was, we've heard from our members that there has been a lack of benchmarks, I suppose you'd call them, but indexes, measures, metrics that they can measure against for the industry. Things like budget is a big one. How big should my budget be? Where is my budget being spent? How big should my marketing organisation be? How should it be centralised? Should it be localised? What's the balance and so on? What ROI can you expect if you spend X here? So we started collecting this data. Partly from the members themselves, so we have this kind of give to get model. You give your information, and you get the aggregated industry information on the back of it. But we also collect in a broader sense as well from very well targeted large scale B2B marketing organisations. So what it's given us is a near real time dashboard for some of those key metrics that I've described and more. And what we've heard from 2 or 3 members now is that they've used that this year to wrangle for more budget, that they've used the Community Index to basically go to the board and say, look, in our industry, most organizations are spending X percent as a percentage of turnover on marketing. We need to be investing more. That's been a great success story for us, because it means that's the most rewarding thing we could possibly do, is that we're providing information that helps marketers, be more influential, affect change, have the evidence to drive change projects, build the business case for marketing in the organization. And really that's what we want to do, is raise the level and quality of B2B marketing globally.
I love that. And you're giving them the data to have those conversations with the board. Looking at the data you're getting out of the community in terms of themes you're seeing, or, these common challenges. What are you seeing in B2B marketing right now? What are the themes coming out of the community that marketers are struggling with these days?
A big theme for us right now is what we're calling the commercial marketer. So this is really is a macro theme that breaks down then into some smaller themes that we're working through a whole set of ways of supporting, from training to technical models to mentoring. And what I mean by the commercial marketer is the ability for a marketing leader or an aspiring marketing leader to be taken as a serious business leader in the organization. And I think there are a few dynamics here. One is that, I'd love to hear your view on this, because you'll know more about this than I will, but I think there's been a shift a little bit from, if you take go-to-market, and in a simplified way, I'd say that there are three parts of go-to-market. There's product sales and marketing, three legs of the go-to-market stool. And I think marketing has, in a lot of organizations, shifted, rather than being somebody who's doing pricing and, is involved in the product development and the value proposition design, they've been shifted into marcoms. And if they're in marcoms, that is a small slice of the value that marketing can deliver. And I think in some organizations, probably more than many would care to admit, product are driving the bus with sales, and marketing are just doing the marcoms. And that's where that sort of moniker of, marketing, colouring in PowerPoint presentations in the basement comes from, which is unfair. But I think if marketing are just doing marcoms, they're missing the point. And what we feel as an organisation is that if marketers want to be taken seriously, they've got to be much more closely linked to strategy. They've got to be able to speak the language of the CFO. There's no good coming to the board and talking about MQLs and SQLs and SLs. They don't care. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear, how are you tangibly driving growth? These are the business objectives. This is the strategy. This is the way that we're set up. This is what we're measuring success by. What does marketing's role in that, in value creation, in driving value, in hitting our numbers? How are you operating? The second you say to me MQL, I've switched off as the CFO or the CEO. And I think also a dynamic here is that you're seeing the CRO, particularly in the States, but increasingly in Europe as well, and other parts of the world. The CRO is starting to win at the board because they're seen as the tangible growth driver who can speak the language of the CFO, who is recognizing the financial metrics that the business is run by. And I think the CRO is starting to gain ground, and marketing is increasingly reporting into the CRO who's on the board. Where actually there's no reason why the CMO shouldn't be on the board. And there's no reason why, and don't get me wrong, CROs are fantastic individuals, and often there's a great reason why marketing comes up through the CRO. But if it's because the CMO in the organization is not taken as seriously as somebody who's come from a sales background, that's wrong.
It's interesting. one of the reasons why I personally got into sales was because I wanted to get into marketing. And the advice I got was go into sales first, learn the sales organization, the priorities, the challenges. So when you become a marketer, you can have that conversation and relate.
Interesting.
I love the marketing side. It's what I personally love. But, I almost wonder if a lot of the CROs that I've met and personally worked with have sales backgrounds. And my guess is, not only can they speak the CFO speak, but probably better at selling their position up to the board, right?
Right. I mean, it's so many organizations, sales drives the bus, and you can understand why, because there's a tangible link between the amount of sales that you make and the amount the business grows. And marketing sits in as well where they've got the intangibles of brand, They've got the intangibles of creative and attribution, where a piece of work that they did 2 years ago, sales may get the benefit from that in the 2 years, but everyone forgets what they did 2 years before. As somebody who comes from sales, I completely get it. Sales will close the deal, and they're not going to go, well, thank you, marketing, because that was because of the work. They're going to go, I closed, I nailed that deal, and that was all me.
Yeah.
So I think what we're trying to do is give marketers and B2B marketing the more of the tools and the credibility and the credit that they deserve for driving growth and driving value in organizations.
Now, where does marketing and sales alignment fit into this? Because I know that's a challenge I keep hearing come up all the time, especially in the partner marketing side, is there is a need to align with sales. Is that the right way to thinking about it?
No. Why are we talking about sales and marketing alignment still?
It comes up all the time.
We do. It does come up all the time. It comes up in Propolis, and we fall into that trap sometimes. If we're talking about sales and marketing alignment, we're at the wrong end of the telescope, right? Because you're talking about internal processes. You're talking about how we're navel gazing. We're looking inwardly at how our processes should line up. It's buyer enablement we should be thinking about. The buyer is the right end of the telescope. It's why you have, again, the CRO, because it's about growth, stupid. It's not about petty, internal squabbles between sales and marketing. Well, it wasn't the sales accepted lead because, oh God, it's about the amount that between sales and marketing together can build into the pipeline how many deals they can close. That's how they do it. And marketing has a role, not just at the top of the funnel, marketing has a role all the way through to the deal closing. And actually, you could argue, and we're probably going way off path here, is that the fact that you've got marketing and sales itself as labels is unhelpful. But some organisations just have growth teams.
Yeah.
Different skill sets, but growth teams, because they've got one target. I'm going through a process at the moment in our organisation, really doing OKRs instead of KPIs. Everyone talks about KPIs, but OKRs I think are really done well, are really successful. And you have, with an OKR, you've got a very clear objective and the results, and they're shared objectives. So those objectives will sit across marketing, sales, and product, so that they're forced to work together because they're all dependent on each other to achieve those objectives. And I think that's one way of doing it. And it takes some work, and it's worth putting the effort in. But I think that, sales and marketing alignment is just, we're talking about the wrong thing. It should be consigned to history.
I love it. First of all, I love how passionate you are about that. And can we coin the term buyer enablement? Because I think that should stick.
Feel free. I've banged on about it a little bit. I'm sure I didn't invent it, but it is. In fact, it came out of, funnily enough, and I'm going to plug Propolis here. When our first community sprint was about sales enablement. So I can't own this phrase, to be fair. It came out of that. The first week was about all of the issues around sales and marketing alignment, where everyone just said, well, sales do this, and marketing do this, and marketing don't really understand what's. It was, everybody just had a sort of a.
Yeah.
And in the second week, somebody said, actually, I think we've got it wrong. I think we're talking about the wrong thing. The buying group has changed. The Jolt effect is a brilliant piece of research that talks about the complexities of influencing buyers right now. Really great piece of research. But actually, buying the buyer and their world and understanding them and thinking about buyer enablement was what came out of that sprint. So
I love it.
Propolis can own that, not me.
Yeah, no, let me ask you this. So, I could see if someone's in your position, top down, saying, hey, we need to do buyer enablement. Like this is where we need to go, institute OKRs. But if you're a marketer, head of marketing, and you want to go this direction, but you're set up in a sales and marketing process, like what should they be thinking about to kind of drive that conversation internally and drive that message up and across the aisle?
Yeah, well, I think understanding the buyer. I mean, when did marketing last speak to the customer? That I find a lot in organisations. Sales speak to the customer. If you're in a media organisation, editorial speak to the customer. When did marketing last speak to the customer? To really understand the dynamics of their purchase process, to understand that the things that they're wrestling with. So I would start with more people in the organisation talking to customers, and making that a metric. Because if you've just got sales talking to customers, then they've got the power. How many times you've been in sales? How many times have somebody given you a hard time, or said what's going on in the market? You say, well, so and so customer said X, and people just take it as gospel because the customer is right. So I think actually a big start of it is marketing starting to push themselves into some of those conversations and say, look, we're out for the same goal here. What we want to do is generate pipeline for you because I'm targeted on the same thing. So I'd really like to understand the customer's world. I think having non-sales conversations is actually really helpful for sales as well. For marketing to come on and say, look, I'd just really like to understand a little bit more about how you operate. You can have a disarming conversation with a customer that isn't a sales conversation and learn a whole lot more. So I think that's a good start, is actually marketing just going, I'd actually like to understand the customer a bit more and have more contact with the customer.
I mean, certainly as they're looking to, have those conversations with the board, right? I could see that playing a pivotal role in terms of understanding where the market is and where the market's going.
Yeah, and sales will say, oh no, whoa, but why? Because marketing are there to help you close that deal. So why would you not want them to understand your customer? I'll tell you why, because sales, having been there, they'll get caught out.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So more people talking to the customer is better for the whole organization, because nobody can hide behind, well, the customer is doing this.
Or buyer enablement. Let's get that to stick. So what's next for Propolis? What are you most excited about in the future?
So we've got quite a few things like, so the whole commercial marketer thing we're excited about, because we feel that is a theme that where we can really help, and where we can really pool our expertise to do some super practical things that can help. So, we're working on some courses that are about, the language of the CFO, being able to just understand what the wider business metrics are. We've got some models that we're working on. So the commercial marketer is the theme we're really interested in. The community index we're taking on to the next stage. So we're working on lead gen metrics. So lead gen seems to be making a comeback, actually. It used to be the grubby sort of slightly murky end of the market, but lead gen seems to be much more prominent. I don't know whether you found that in the last
What are you seeing with that specifically? Or is it BANT style leads? Is it MQLs, like filling top of the funnel? What are you seeing?
I think, I'm going to get into trouble here, but I think everybody has been selling leads for the last 10 years. They might call it something else. They might call it ABM, ABX. They might call it growth. They might call it thing, but everybody's been selling leads. Most agencies are, want to generate leads.
So personally, just a little sidetrack, I get hit up all the time to just start my own lead gen company, because there's all these companies in India that would just outsource it. And so literally I could go out tomorrow, put up a website, brand, we have some sort of proprietary database, and it's just call centers in India filling it. And so that's why there's just so many people out there selling leads right now.
Completely. And actually Joel, our editor-in-chief and co-founder, mentioned this to me the other day, which I think is really interesting. A lot of these very, very good lead gen companies in Asia, in India particularly, are now wanting to be taken a bit more seriously, and are having US-based leadership teams and a US front end to give them credibility, because the demand is growing. And they want to scale, and they can see the good work that they're doing, but they can also see that they're seen as they don't have a particularly good reputation, let's say, despite doing brilliant work. So we're starting to see that. So community index, we're going to do some lead gen metrics, and we're also building some ABM metrics as well.
Good.
Which is not easy. It's not easy. Getting that data right is not easy, but we're in the process of building that as well. So we're going to keep investing in the community index to provide, reliable metrics that, people can, CMOs, marketing leaders, marketing teams can make decisions based on. And continuing to integrate with our events. We have this, what's lovely about Propolis is, when you can get the community to come together and help, diagnose, solve, recommend changes to ways of working and practices, we then can inform our events as well. So we have Ignite, we have our ABM conference. We can use that research to go to a wider audience and just say, look, this is what we've discovered. So it gives us this kind of brilliant funnel of new insight and intelligence that we can then bring into our events as well to sort of, further integration with our physical events. So they become kind of symbiotic.
Well, I mean, going back to buyer enablement, you now have your own data source of, a customer feed where you get a real-time access to what the customers want, right? To help your events and the rest of your strategy. So, a lot of our customers are on the tech side, right? So they're tech B2B marketers.
Yeah.
And some of them have their own communities, right? Whether it's, Cisco buyers or Google buyers.
Yeah.
What advice do you have, from your learnings for marketers looking to build their own customer communities?
Yeah, it's a really good question because it's a different lens then. And I think I'll come on to that question, but one of the challenges we have is around making sure that it is not a sales platform.
Right.
So our ecosystem is based on, 3 core customer groups. You've got MarTech vendors, agencies, and client-side marketers. And Propolis was built for client-side marketers initially, and we've gradually, very carefully brought in some agencies with strict rules around non-selling, about contributing. And the reason we brought them in is because they do contribute. And because agencies exist, because clients need their services. Agencies are brilliant, and I think they get a hard time sometimes. Clients need agencies because they give expertise, they give perspective from other organisations that the client can't get on their own, and an in-house team can't get. So bringing in agencies was a natural step. We've been very careful with MarTech vendors because the selling bit, we worry that gets in sales. So
sure.
In the world of customers, if you want to build a trusted community, do not sell. Build a community where you're providing, as far as you can, independent expertise, solve the problems that customers want you to solve, and resist the temptation to sell your own products. Convene the community because you can own the community, and it rubs off very, very nicely on you to own that community, but try to avoid that, making it a sales community, because it dies. You don't get the vulnerability, you don't get the genuine conversation, because if people say, look, I'm having this challenge with my tech stack, and the first thing you do is go, well, we've got a product for that.
Yeah.
There's no community there.
Yeah.
It just becomes an e-commerce, directory style platform. So I think the great benefit for brands who can create community is that you do build trust. You do build a kind of a closed user group where you can serve real niche content, micro content. You can go down with some granularity into certain subject areas that you couldn't do anywhere else because people don't care, or that you need to do things at scale. You can't go down into some of the real granular issues that might help customers. So expertise, have genuine experts. It's worth investing in people who can genuinely provide independent expertise on a particular subject area. Communities, they don't work on their own. Okay, we'd like to think if you've got scale and you're, a social media platform which is a community, or Quora, or one of those, they do work on their own because you've got scale. But when you start out, you have to nurture communities. It takes community management. It takes some nudging, and we have to, somebody posts a question and it goes quiet. We have to go, just give someone a nudge and say, look, this is your area of expertise. Would you help answer that question? It takes curating.
Well, I think the misconception is if I build it, they will come.
Yeah, the field of dreams. Yeah, exactly. They will come, but they won't do anything. They'll come, they'll join, they'll lurk.
That, right? Yeah. I love it. I think authenticity is key in everything. I mean, that's what we try to do on the show, right? That's why we spent 10 minutes talking about tea to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it stands out, authenticity. That's in a kind of a sea of inauthentic communication and communication at scale. True authenticity stands out. So actually, in some ways, it's easier to achieve because if you're really authentic, you can't, by definition, you can't force being authentic. It's a bit of a head scratcher. You are or you're not, and if you are, it stands out.
Well, this has been great. You've shared a lot of wisdom, a lot of practical advice, which it sounds like you're doing in the community. I don't know if you have any other advice to give, but I'd love for you to just end us with a piece of advice for the show.
Never trust a man in red trousers. That was what my dad used to say. I shouldn't say that.
So is that a British
You might have to scratch that out.
Is that
I don't know if it's a British thing, but
I've heard it before.
I grew up with
know.
that. I grew up with that. But I've met lots of people in red trousers, men in red trousers who are thoroughly nice people. So
Is that a style in Britain? Are the red trousers or?
It stands out.
Okay.
It stands out when it happens. That's why it's kind of rare. Anyway, but that's not my advice. my advice is that there is genuinely really no problem or no stupid question or thing that you're wrestling with that somebody else out there isn't also wrestling with. And I think the advice is asking for help and asking for advice is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness.
I love it. We'll leave it right there. Well, cheers, Richard. I think I enjoyed the tea more than you, but you did all the talking.
I didn't get a chance. Yeah, sorry. I'll still enjoy it. Cheers.
Cheers.
It's great to see you, Rick.
Yeah, you
Thank
too.
you.